Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cyber Dev Nerd channel. Today we'll talk about files created by the sudo command which may help you during your investigation. Let's get started.
Hey guys. So, as you may know, I have been conducting forensics for quite some time for Windows and also for Linux. My knowledge for Linux is maybe somehow limited. Definitely, I feel much better when we are talking about the Windows systems, but I also have been doing that for Linux. But recently, I have discovered one artifact that I have not been aware of before. Simply saying, every time when you or threat actor or anything that is able to manage the account runs a sudo command to start a different command, this system will track that execution and will create a new file for the account. Will use the name of the account that issued this command under this path which you can see listed in my article var run sudo ts. Uh, for each account, there will be a completely separate file, which is very interesting. And the timestamp of that file will indicate the last usage of the sudo command. Okay, so when I observed that, I was like, I immediately knew that I will create an article for that because I couldn't find anything in the internet talking about that files like I do here. There are there is some documentation, of course, talking about that files, and there are some articles about that, but it's not from the forensics point of view, right? It's just general configuration for Linux and the explanation of the sudo command. Uh, in our situation, when we see something like that, this is definitely something we want to include in our investigations. And of course, this is another timestamp that we want to add to our final timeline. Before we dive deeper for that in that topic, let's talk about sudo because I think there may be some people who are reading this article who are not necessarily familiar with sudo command. I know that it's much obvious that we are doing Windows forensics, but when we are talking about the Linux, I know that this topic is quite challenging. So what the sudo command is, basically on Linux, there is a possibility to be a standard user but run commands as a root. And to accomplish that, we have to use sudo command. But of course, if you want to run something as a root but you're a standard user, your account has to be added to the sudoers file or just to a sudo group. Okay, you can quickly review the configuration of that feature reviewing this file. uh, I will show you how it looks like on my VM. As you can see, currently I'm working as a root. So we will the content of this file, and this is how it looks like on my VM. There is a configuration. There is one line saying that all members of a group sudo are able to execute any command as a root. Okay. Uh, this is how it looks like on my VM, but there is one more scenario, and that's also included in my article. There is a possibility that someone put a line like that. That one in turn will indicate that everyone is able to run a sudo without actually providing a password for that account, and that's very dangerous. There is a lot of risk associated with that line because that means that if there is a service running and is exposed to the internet and someone is able to exploit that service and the account responsible for that service is added to a sudo group, and believe me, it's possible, I have seen that several times, that actually this account, the service account, is a part of a sudo group, and there is a configuration like no pass double D. It means that the only one thing that threat actor has to do to compromise to root the box in the question is just to run something with sudo, and he doesn't even have to provide the password for that account. So as you can see, it's a very risky configuration, but sometimes we can see a configuration like this. Here I'm talking how we can actually add a new account and add it to a group, a sudo group, so we can do some tests. We'll skip that part because there is like no need to talk about that in that video. But we will use sudo. So first of all, we'll change an account. We'll log in as Bob. Let me clear the screen. And now we'll use sudo to run a whoami command to see what's the output. Actually, I'm running this command as a Bob, so some of you may think that in the results I will get the information that the command was that I'm just a Bob, right? But that's not true. It will tell me that I'm running this command as a root account, okay? Because I use sudo. And this is how it works. Like there's one more thing that we also have to talk before we'll get actually to the most important part of that video. That let me run one command first. If you want to run something using sudo, the system will ask you to provide credential, password for the account which is used to run the sudo command. Okay, don't confuse that with the password for a root account. This is something else. So let me put a password for Bob. And now every time when I run another command, it doesn't matter what I will use, the system will not ask me to run that to provide the password for Bob again. Why? Because system will remember for another 15 minutes, or some sources say that just for 5 minutes. I think it depends on the distro, but basically the system will not ask me to retype that credentials. So that's very handy, especially when you are doing some administrative stuff. Maybe you're changing a configuration or managing a server wherever you're doing, there's like no need to run to provide the password every time when you run the command. And why I'm talking about that? Because it's very important, and we'll get to that in the moment. So here I'm showing you how you can clear the timer with sudo k. So let's imagine that we want to clean the cache password. So we'll run sudo -k. And now when I try to run the command again, for example, sudo who am I, the system indeed will ask me to provide the password one more time because that timer of 15 minutes has been already reset. There's also a way to configure the timestamp. You can do it by editing a sudo's file using a vi sudo command. We'll skip that part. You can test it if you want and see how it works, but simply saying that the timer can be modified. But what's important for us is that the files that I showed you at the very beginning, let me scroll up under that path, these files created. So let's actually, you know what? Let's actually first log in as a root. So I will change my account to root. And now let's see what we have in that folder. As you can see, there are two files, one for Bob and one for John. That files were created by system because they needed to know the last time when sudo was used, so then the system can count the time that passed, that has passed since the moment when the first execution of sudo took place on the system. Okay, so now it knows that, okay, from that time I will have to count 15 minutes. If we run a sudo command one more time after 15 minutes, so in that case, let's imagine that it's 9 p.m., I don't know, 30 or something like that, then I will have to retype my password because that window time of 15 minutes has already ended. Okay, but what does it mean for us? For digital forensic and incident response analyst, or just a SOC analyst, or whoever is performing the investigation, sometimes it can be even just an admin in the organization. That timestamp should be included in your times in your timeline because it will tell you the last execution of sudo for Bob. Is it important? Of course it is. Let's imagine the situation. Of course, there are older artifacts that you can use to tell when sudo was run. There are specific Linux logs. There are multiple different places where actually you can find entries for sudo syslog. There may be even a separate file for sudo. And of course, default outlog files on Debian or secure on Red Hat. But let's imagine the situation that threat actor was able to clear all logs. Okay, what then? Then of course there is like no way to refer to that logs because they don't even exist. And let's go even further. Let's imagine the situation that the collection was delivered to you by someone else, and there is like no way to work with memory, and there is like no way to recover that logs. Then you have a problem. You may have a bash history, but by default in the bash history, you will not find the timestamps for the commands that were executed. But if you have a bash history, you review that, and you can discover that actually Bob ran some malicious commands, and one of that command was sudo, then you can take a look at that file and tell what was at least the last time when sudo was executed. And that may help you to determine the time of the infection. Okay, this will be at maybe it will be just a starting point, or maybe it will be everything that you are able to discover. It depends, of course, on your configuration. If you're working for the client mm, that was able to provide you only a basic collection, they don't have EDRs, they don't have anything else, then of course the situation is much more complicated, and it may be the only one thing that you discover. But from the other side, that time may help you to identify other things that took place on that system. So like I said, this is a very interesting artifact that you should always include your investigation. Sometimes it may be everything that you will be able to determine the time of the infection. You will correlate that time of the bash history. Sometimes, of course, you may have much more. You may have the entire history for sudo. Then, of course, it may be not a significant artifact, but keep in mind that we should always merge all artifacts that we have together and build the one consolidated timeline. We don't want to only rely on one source of information. It never works like that. We always add everything that we can, right? That's all for today. Thank you very much, and see you again in the next episode. Bye.
Okay guys, and that would be all. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to click the subscribe button and ring the bell notification below so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for more insight and see you again in the next episode. Bye!